Joined now by former Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Vice President, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Hugh, it's great to be back with you. Thanks for having me on.
So, Mr. Vice President, you are the equal of any friend that Israel has in the United States. What do you make of the conduct of the Biden administration, the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, everybody towards Israel in the last 3 months?
Well, first, let me say what happened on October 7th was the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. I traveled there in January on a support trip. I walked and stood on the blood-stained carpets of homes in a kibbutz known as Kfar Aza. I walked in the field where young people at a concert were literally brutalized and slaughtered. And there can only be one message for our most cherished ally, and that is America stands with Israel. And I have been calling on this administration and this president to send an unambiguous message. But we've gotten the opposite. As you've said many times, we began with President Biden expressing strong and unwavering support, but now we're beginning to see the hemming and the hawing of President Joe Biden at precisely the time that Israel and Israeli forces are on the cusp of what I think has the potential of being the decisive battle. I mean, Israel has no choice but to invade Rafah and hunt down and destroy Hamas once and for all. And for President Biden last week to literally threaten to withhold munitions was an outrage. I called it out when it happened. And I must tell you, I'm more than pleased that House Republicans are moving a resolution this week that I think will get bipartisan support condemning President Biden's threatened pause, and this is a time as the world wavers, we all knew they would in their support for Israel. This is time to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Israel until the fight is done and Hamas is destroyed, and they have everything they need to confront any ongoing surrogate or direct attacks by the real and ultimate enemy here, which is Iran.
Now, Vice President Pence, not only did you participate in our strategy and our planning in Afghanistan and Iraq, you've got a son and a son-in-law on active duty, so you know how stressful this is for the parents of Israel whose kids are in Gaza. But I think they're very clear-eyed about how long they're going to have to be there. There are arguments about what comes next, but it doesn't seem to me we're doing anyone a service if we suggest to them that it's going to be over after Rafah. I think I heard Netanyahu tell Dan Senor this week it's going to be phase one is destroy the battalions, phase two is mop up, phase three is whack-a-mole with the Hamas ones and twos everywhere. This could be another year, don't you think?
It could, but here, let's begin with the military principle. As people are talking about the aftermath before the fight is over, there's an old saying, Hugh, that one does not make peace with one's enemy, one makes peace with one's defeated enemy. Mm-hmm. And what's most important in this moment is that Israel have the resources and the support from the United States of America to utterly defeat Hamas, literally to destroy their capacity to project force, and then respect their ability to go forward. Look, you mentioned, and you've got members of your immediate family in the service. I've got two in uniform in our immediate family. I will tell you, in my trip in January, and your listeners around the country, if they haven't, well, I retweeted it. If they haven't watched Douglas Murray's 20-minute presentation at the Manhattan Institute, it's on my Twitter account. It went viral on the internet. He describes what I saw when I visited an artillery battery on the northern border of Israel, facing into Lebanon, and that was. I was over, as much as I was grieved and heartbroken by what we saw in the aftermath of the Hamas attack in the south of Israel, I couldn't be more inspired by the young men and women in uniform in Israeli Defense Forces, many of which are also American citizens, who literally ran to the sound of the guns on October 7th. I was up there with the commander of forces on the northern border. He told me that 90% of the reservists reported for duty within 12 hours on the northern border, and almost half of them didn't even have orders. They showed up, they did what needed to be done, and as one soldier told me, we were literally sitting, grabbing a bite to eat in a muddy field at this artillery battery. He said, "My wife is home with our 4 small children. When I grabbed my gear and I headed north on October 7th, she looked at me and said, 'Don't come home until the job is done.'" And that's the attitude the United States of America should have, with deep, deep admiration for the courageous people of Israel in this fight.
Well, let me put out the two competing explanations of Team Biden's actions that I've heard. One comes from Matt Continetti and one comes from John Podhoretz. Matt Continetti just has the argument that Joe Biden's a terrible politician. He doesn't know how to read polls, and he's all screwed up, and his strategy is bad. John Podhoretz argues there's a deep psychological need for Joe Biden to blame somebody for his political woes, and he's blaming Bibi Netanyahu. What do you make of both of those? Because it doesn't make any political or policy sense to do what Team Biden has done.
No, I don't understand it. It's hard for me to put President Biden on the couch. I will tell you, I'm deeply suspicious that domestic politics is playing a role here. There are key states where there are, important populations. Michigan comes to mind that he may want to curry favor with. And of course, he's lost traction with younger Americans, and he may literally be trying to pander. And this is precisely the wrong thing to do. I observed a week ago that when President Biden threatened to pause military aid to Israel, I said, gee, I remember serving alongside a president a few short years ago that was accused of pausing aid and was impeached for it. So to me, this is a matter of enormous magnitude. I don't know, but I suspect domestic politics is playing a role. But there's also that old saying, Hugh, that politics should end at the shoreline of this country, and especially when we have a cherished ally in a fight for its own survival. There should only be one voice, one message coming from this country, and that message should be America stands with Israel.
Now, Vice President Pence, you are a longtime Hoosier, a lifelong Hoosier, congressman before you were governor before you were vice president. Like Ohio, you shared a border with Michigan that you had to patrol constantly because those Michiganders will get out of there as soon as they can. But Michigan. Is President Biden? I think he's just nuts. I know Michigan pretty well. Yes, I know there's a large Arab American population, but there's a large Jewish population. It's not a good Michigan strategy. Michigan's a normal place most of the time.
No, it's a really dumb strategy. And look, there's a lot of patriotic Americans in every community in Michigan, and it's a good heartland state. And it makes no sense to me at all. It just feels like politics to me. It really does. But you bring up Michigan, I'll tell you, his electric vehicle mandate, it literally, the people of Michigan, the people of the heartland, we do a lot of automotive construction in Indiana too. And I tell you, they know this is a job killer for our traditional automotive industry. And so Biden actually ends up coming out. He created the problem with his electric vehicle mandate, and now he's turned around, doubling down on tariffs to solve a problem that he created. Look, I'm all in favor of tough tariffs on China, and we put $250 billion in tariffs, and I think we got to continue to stand firm. But it's just amazing. I mean, it's one more example where you have this administration zigging and zagging all over the map. I couldn't be more grateful a few weeks ago that Speaker Mike Johnson and leadership in the Congress managed to move that enormously important aid bill, support for Ukraine, for Israel, for Taiwan, and a bill forcing the sale of China's TikTok. But it wasn't a result of Joe Biden's leadership. I said at the time I thought Speaker Mike Johnson did a better job explaining our national interest in Ukraine in 2 days than Joe Biden had done in 2 years. Speaker Johnson just said, I'd rather send bullets than boys. and that really is the point. We're supporting Ukraine in their fight against Russia because if Russia crosses another border that's a NATO ally, we're going to have to send yours and mine to go fight.
Vice President, during your tenure as Vice President,
Hey,
you
Hugh.
kicked off a series of speeches about China. And today, Putin is in China again. Do you think
Right.
America has forgotten that our number one adversary in the world is China?
I don't think America has forgotten it, but I have to tell you that the Biden administration's overall policy seems to suggest that they have. I mean, despite their recent round of tariffs on China, the reality is that this administration, when they came into office, literally has cut military spending at a time that there's an enormous military buildup and ongoing provocations by China. I will tell you that, at the end of the day, we have to recognize China's not only our greatest economic and strategic challenge in the 21st century, but also as evidenced by Vladimir Putin in Beijing today and China's relationship with Iran. I mean, there is, in fact, this new axis of evil. All roads lead back to Beijing, and that's why it was so important. I want to commend you, Hugh, for your clarion voice on the airways of America in support of our efforts to give the Ukrainian military what they need to repel the Russian invasion. Because at the end of the day, it's become more and more clear that China is the principal and leading supporter of Putin's war of aggression in Ukraine. The way we can confront China is to continue to give Ukraine what they need to make the fight, continue to support Israel against not only Hamas, but the other surrogates and ultimately Iran, and to continue to stand strong in the Asia Pacific by building up a military that is still not on track to be where we need to be to defend our nation and defend our interests around the world in the 21st century.
Last question, Mr. Vice President. We got a minute. You've debated Kamala Harris. We're going to get a new running mate with Donald Trump. What's your advice to whoever that is, whether it's Doug Burgum or Tom Cotton or whoever?
Yeah. Well, I've had the opportunity to be on the stage with her. Just remember, she's a prosecutor. But I think, look, we've got the better portion on our side. I'm incredibly proud of the record of our administration. And this administration has weakened America at home and abroad. She'll try and bring up other issues. She'll try and raise the question of abortion. She'll try and relitigate the past. I think holding her accountable to the record, the failed record of the Biden-Harris administration is the prescription. It's what I sought to do, to compare our record to their plans. And whoever is the former president's running mate in this election cycle should hold her to account for the failed policies of the Biden-Harris administration, and I expect they will.
Vice President Michael Pence, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thanks. Great to be on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.